Well, good afternoon, boys and goyim. This is Vincent Bird of the 11th Hour Remnant Messenger coming to you once again with a new message. Now, you'll find me returning to similar similar topics from time to time throughout my YouTube presentations. And I do this because I cannot emphasize enough the importance of the certain of Yahweh's laws that jeopardize our very salvation. Now, I realize that I tend to be talking to like-minded individuals and a small group of the faithful viewers that I have, and I am humbly grateful to you all for your subscriptions. As you know, I ask for no donations, sell no books or pamphlets or tracts. This is a labor of love for me and my concern for my kindred and your future. Now on to my presentation today, like kind after like kind. This seemingly innocuous verse from the Bible is quickly read over, rationalized, and indeed disregarded by the preachers of today. If they truly knew what it meant and its implications, they wouldn't preach to the mixed multitudes, forbid anyone of color entering their congregations, and more importantly, they would never perform a mixed race marriage in their apostate churches. This immutable law of Yahweh is abundantly clear to the discerning studier of Yahweh's word. For example, a mud wasp will never mate or associate with a paper wasp. A blue jay will not mate or associate with a robin. A jaguar will not mate or associate with a panther. A sunflower will not cross-pollinate with a rose and create a hybrid. I could do this all day long with one example after another. Actually, I could do this for a week. The list is endless. Without human intervention, the immutable laws of the universe, or Yahweh's laws, are perfect, predictable, and consistent. Man, with his unfathomable ego, attempts to play God all the time. We genetically engineer our foods when our God has given us food to suffice we Adam man for 6 millennia. We hybridize and alter our animals. We create chemicals that destroy our soils. We no longer lay fallow our land every 7 years to replenish and revitalize itself as commanded in the Bible. We have become a race who has lost its identity if most of us ever knew who we were at all. When presenting the truth to our kindred, they become more incensed than the people of color. We no longer separate, read the Bible with discernment, fall prey to the Jew contrivances, are led by our collective nose rings in believing the government lies, sit in the pews or of our apostate churches while your pastors tell you carefully devised stories about who and what of the Bible, Jesus the Christ, and tells you that the law was nailed on the cross. Your preacher will tell you the Pauline doctrine not to be entangled in the affairs of the world, when indeed we are not only to be a light to our kindred, we are to take an active part in how we are governed, if at all, until Yeshua returns. We will certainly be a theocracy then, and I personally can hardly wait for that great day. Here's a few reasons for the segregations of the races. God wills all races to be as he made them. Any violation of God's original purpose manifests insubordination to him, and you can find intimacies of that in Acts 17:26, Romans 9:19 through 24. God made everything to reproduce after its own kind. You can find that easily in Genesis chapter 1, 11 and 12, 21 through 25, chapter 6 and 20, and 7 and 14. Kind means type and color, or he would have kept them all alike to begin with. God originally determined the bounds of the habitations of the nations. You can find that in Genesis, Acts, and Deuteronomy. Miscegenation means the mixture of the races, especially the black and white races, or those of outstanding type or color. The Bible even goes farther in opposing this. It is against different branches of the same stock, intermarrying, such as Israelites marrying other descendants of Abraham. And you can find that in Ezra 9:10 and at Nehemiah 9:13 and Jeremiah 50:37. Abraham forbade Eliezer to take a wife for Isaac of the Canaanites, and that's in Genesis 24. God was so pleased with this that he directed whom to get. Genesis 24:7, 12 through 27. Isaac forbade Jacob to take a wife of the Canaanites, and now you can find that in Genesis. Abraham sent all of his sons of the concubines, even of his second wife, far away from Isaac, so that their descendants would not mix, and that's in Genesis 25, 1 through 6. Esau disobeyed this law, bringing the final break between him and his father after a lifelong companionship with him. Esau wasn't banished and became Edom, and God hates him because of a bowl of porridge. I mentioned this in another presentation. The two branches of Isaac remain segregated forever, and that's in Genesis 30, 46, 8 through 26. Ishmael and Isaac's descendants remain segregated forever. We're supposed to be segregated today. We're not supposed to mix with our Persian cousins over there or our Arab cousins over there. Jacob's sons destroyed a whole city to maintain segregation. That's in Genesis 34. God forbade intermarriage between Israel and all the other nations, and that's in Exodus 34, 12 through 16, and in Deuteronomy 7. Joshua forbade the same thing on the sentence of death, and that's in Joshua 22. God cursed angels for leaving their first estate and their own habitation to marry the daughters of men. Miscegenation caused Israel to be cursed, and you can find that in Judges 3, 6, and 7, Numbers 25, 1 through 8. This was Solomon's great sin, 1 Kings 12, and we know that. This was the sin of the Israelites returning from Babylon. And you can find that whole dissertation of Ezra after he found the parchments in Ezra 9, 1 through 10, 2, 10 through 18, 44, and chapter 13, 1 through 30. God commanded Israel to be segregated, Leviticus 20:24 and Numbers 23:9. Israelites recognized as a separate people in all ages because of God's choice and command, and that's in Matthew 10:6 and John 1:11. Equal rights in the gospel gives no right to break this eternal law. Segregation between the Israelites and all other nations is to remain for eternity. That's in Isaiah 2, Ezekiel 37, Zechariah, Matthew, Luke, and Revelation. All nations will remain segregated from one another in their own parts of the earth forever. We were given these great United States by Yahweh God. I don't care who tries to dispute that. It's a lie. It's from the pit of hell. This grand nation was given to the Israelites, the nations of white Europe, the Indo-Europeans, the Aryans, Scandinavians, Germanic peoples, Anglo-Saxons. And we have destroyed this, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Certain people in Israel were not even to worship with other people, and yet we allow mixed bloods and blacks and Latinos and every other person of color to come into our congregation. Even in heaven, certain groups will not be allowed to worship together. You can find that in Revelation. Segregation was so strong in the Old Testament that an ox and an ass couldn't even work together. That's in Deuteronomy 22:10. Miscegenation caused disunity among God's people, and it's happening here in the United States. Stock was forbidden to be bred with other kinds of stock, and yet we're doing it every day by mixing the blood and genetically engineering our fish and our animals and giving hormones to our chickens so they can fully mature in 6 weeks. Sowing mixed seed in the same field was unlawful. Different seeds were forbidden to be planted in the vineyards. And wearing garments of mixed fabrics was even forbidden. Now, are these outrageous laws? No. They were to teach us that we were not to mix anything. God made everything in perfection, and man only makes it complicated so he can make a profit off of it. Christians and certain other people of a like race are to be segregated. And that you can find that all through the Bible. The Judeo-Christian clergy are among the most powerful forces, second only to the Jews, who are literally forcing we Adamites into mixing with other races as a result of Jewish teachings that has been introduced to Christianity today through their infiltration of our seminaries and our totally ignorant preachers. In the Bible, Yahweh repeatedly warns us against the mixing of races and especially against intermarriage and mongrelization. Some of this has been overlooked because of the imperfect translation out of the Hebrew and Greek languages in which the Bible was written. Let us examine some of these passages again, carefully noting the exact meaning of the words used in the original tongues. This also comes from false teachings that the Kenite, the descendants of Cain, slipped into the scriptures. In the book of Chronicles, we find recorded there the names and genealogies of the tribes of Israel and where their portions of the inheritance is listed. These were the sons of Caleb, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing. You can look it up for yourself. It's a fairly long dissertation, and it goes down to the Kenites, who the father of the house of Rechab, and you can find that in 1 Chronicles 2:50 through 55. Other genealogies in the Bible go into great detail and never leave out a son, especially the firstborn son. If one reads Genesis 4:1 correctly as depicted, it is not there either. Why is Cain totally left out? And also Esau, by the way. Cain's descendants are mentioned separately in Genesis 4:17 through 24, and it doesn't list Adam as the father of Cain. Wonder why that is. The next place we find Cain in the scriptures is Genesis 15, verse 19, and we will have to read verses 18 through 21 also. In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed I give this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. The Kenites and the Kezanites and the Kadmonites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Raphaims and the Ammonites and the Canaanites and the Girgashites and the Jebusites, they got another portion. They were in that portion. We were to take it away from them, and eventually did to some extent, but we left them alive, and that's why they keep coming back to haunt us and create havoc amongst we Adamites. One of the nations among the Canaanites were the Kenites, which were the descendants of Cain. Being that Cain was of the satanic seed line, he would infect his satanic blood among all of these 10 nations, and the Kenizzites were Edomites. In the Peake's Commentary on the Bible, page 116, we find this about the mixed group of nations spoken of in Genesis 15:19. When the Israelites entered Canaan, they found there a very mixed population, generally designated by the term Amorite or Canaanite. The Adam Clark's Commentary on the Bible, abridged by Ralph Early, page 38, says, The Kenites, here are 10 nations mentioned, though afterwards reckoned but 7. See Deuteronomy 7:1 and Acts 13:19. Probably some of them which existed in Abram's time had been blended, mongrelized with others before the time of Moses, so that only 7 out of the 10 remained. Kenites, they were called metalsmiths, the time of a wandering tribe of people who were associated with the Midianites in Judges 1:16, and later with the Amalekites in 1 Samuel 15:16. The Kenites lived in the desert regions of Sinai, Midian, Edom, Amalek, and the Negev. The Bible first mentions the Kenites as one of the groups that lived in Canaan during the time of Abraham. Their territory was to be taken by we Israelites, and we took it, but we didn't kill them all. The Kenites were metal craftsmen who can trace their ancestry to Tubal Cain, a descendant of Cain. That's in Genesis 4:22. Okay, so Cursed art thou, the Lord singled out the originator and instigator of the temptation for special condemnation and degradation. From that moment he must crawl in the dust and even feed on it. He would slither his way along in disgrace, and hatred would be directed against him from all directions. Man would always regard him as a symbol of the degradation of the one who slandered God, and this is a perfect example and the epitome of a Jew working in the world today. He was to represent not merely the serpent race, but the power of the evil kingdom. As long as life continued, men would hate him and seek to destroy him. I will put enmity, is what the Lord said to Cain. The word Ebad denotes blood feud that runs deepest in the heart of man. Thou shalt bruise. A prophecy of continuing struggle between the descendants of the woman, Eve, and of the serpent, Adam's offspring, through Seth, to destroy each other. Except we don't even know that there's destruction heading our way each and every day by these evil Jews. When translated crush, it seems appropriate to reference concerning the head of the serpent, but not quite so accurate, and also rendered lie in wait, aim at, or for to watch for. The Vulgate renders it contraret, bruise in the first instance, and in this famous passage, called the Protevangelium, first gospel, the announcement of a prolonged struggle, perpetual antagonism, wounds on both sides, and eventual victory for the seeds of women. Well, we're not having much victory these days, are we? Because we haven't got off our collective derrieres and got rid of these evil Jews, these hook-nosed, beady-eyed vipers, as John called them. God's promise that the head of the serpent was to be crushed pointed forward to the coming of Messiah, and a guaranteed victory then. The assurance fell upon the ears of the God's earliest creatures as a blessed hope of redemption. Poke's exilic references, like in 1 Chronicles 2:55, the families of scribes living at Jabaz are said to be Kenites. Apparently, during the kingdom and exile period, certain Kenites had given up nomadic smithing and had taken on a more sedentary but equally honorable profession of a scribe, those that chased Jesus around writing his words down so they could condemn him. Peake's commentary on the Bible says the etymology of the name suggests that they were smiths or artificers, a theory which is supported by the association with the Wadi, where there were copper deposits which had been worked by the Egyptians since the middle of the 3rd millennium. Okay, I'm not going to move into that. We have the scribes, who were public notaries who wrote and signed legal instruments, or ecclesiasticals, and here mentioned not if they were of the tribe of Judah, but because they dwelt among them and probably were allied with them by marriages, and in so a manner incorporated with them, which dwelt, or rather dwelt, Hebrew, were dwellers. For the other translation, which dwelt, may seem to insinuate that these were descendants of Judah, which they were not, but the translation only signifies cohabitation with them, for which cause they are here named with them. All of these things the Jews do today here in America, and because Christians have listened to the lying, deceiving, traitorous priests of Baal, the Judeo-Christian or crypto-Christian clergy, they have almost destroyed our nation and fast destroying our people. What are the Kenites? Well, it's obvious from all this that the scribes in the house of Israel in the days of the kings were Kenites, and that the title of scribes was kept in the family, so to speak, just as it is in some parts of the world today. So it is obvious that the Israelites allowed them to stay in the land with them because they were Kenite scribes that were living in Canaan when Israel first came into the land, and again they should have killed them all after their 40-year trek through the wilderness and their escape from Egypt. For it is the land of Canaan that Yahweh told Abraham, and that same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. The Kenites, and I said all this before. These verses are witnesses that Yahweh gave the land to Abram before he changed his name to Abraham, and some 400 to 500 years before the children of Israel returned to the promised land and under the leadership first of Moses and then of Joshua. Okay. The Kenites were a nomadic people whose original home was in the region just south of Palestine, and they were loosely associated with the Amalekites. Balaam, in his prophecy recorded in Numbers 24:20 through 23, spoke of the Kenites in connection with the Amalekites, and he took up his parable and said, Balaam the son of Beor hath said, and the man whose eyes are open hath said, he hath said, which heard the words of God and knew the knowledge of the Most High, which saw the vision of the Almighty, falling into a trance, but having his eyes opened, I shall see him, but not now. I shall behold him, but not nigh. There shall come a star out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel, and shall smite the corners of Moab, and destroy all the children of Sheath. And Edom shall be a possession, Seir shall also be a possession for his enemies, and Israel shall do valiantly. Out of Jacob shall come he that shall have dominion, and shall destroy him that remaineth in the city. And when he looked on Amalek, he took up his parable and said, Amalek was the first of the nations, but his latter end shall be that he perish forever. And he looked upon the Kenites, and took up his parable, and said, Strong is thy dwelling place, and thou puttest thy nest in a rock. Nevertheless, the Kenites shall be wasted, until Asshur shall carry thee away captive. And he took up his parable, and said, Alas, who shall live when God doeth this? And the ships come from the coast of Chittim, and shall affect Asshur, and shall affect Eber, and he shall also perish forever. And Balaam rose up and returned to his palace, and Balak went on his way. And you can find all of that in Numbers 24. Jeremiah the prophet wrote that Yahweh did not speak, nor did he give any command to Israel concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices in the day that he brought him out of Egypt. For I spake not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in that day that I brought them out of the land of Egypt, concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But this thing I commanded them, saying, Obey my voice, and I will be your God, and ye shall be my people, and walk in all the ways that I have commanded you, that it may be well unto you. But they hearkened not, nor inclined their ear, but walked in the counsels and in the imagination of their evil heart, and went backwards, not forwards. And you can find that in Jeremiah chapter 7, 22 through 24. Now here we can see that Jeremiah has declared the Kenite scribes had falsified the law by writing lies into it. This was because the Kenites were worshippers of Baal, and the fact that animal sacrifice was a very important part of that worship of Baal. Jeremiah's proclamation and denunciation would seem to be substantiated. From a study of the scriptures, we learn that Yahweh's laws are divided into four classes. We have commandments, we have judgments, we have statutes, and we have ordinances. The commandments are the major rules governing man's duties to God. The judgments are the rules government man's relations to other men. And the statutes are the general rules for health, prosperity, and the peace of the nation. This includes the dietary, agricultural, social, and economic laws. And finally, the ordinances are the religious regulations for the various festivals, sacrifices, and offerings. Of these laws, only the ordinances have been set aside by Yeshua in the New Testament. The rituals embodied in them were expressions of Israel's belief that their Redeemer would come in the future. When Yeshua had come and performed the reality of which these rituals symbolized, their usefulness ended. The believer could no longer say that he was waiting for the future coming of our Redeemer. Now, consider some of the laws and what they mean to us today. Our Jewish-led political parties have sold Yahweh an evil deal to get support of the Antichrist and the minority groups. They do this for the sake of temporary power and graft, and by this would destroy the greatness of the white race, we Israelites, forever. The politicians demand that we admit indiscriminately all the world's overflow into our land. They come from pagan lands where people hate our God. They come from Asia and African lands, from Mexico and South America, whose people are totally impossible to assimilate, which would be against Yahweh's laws for we Israelites. These immigrants must either remain a hostile enemy bloc within our borders, or else mongrelize and destroy our white race if we mix with them. Yahweh expressly forbids this. While it is recognized there will be some aliens here as students and merchants and others, these are to be treated with honesty and respect and justice as long as they obey ours and Yahweh's laws. The anti-Christians who hate Yahweh are expressly forbidden to be allowed to live here. We should remove them immediately. In Exodus 23:33, Yahweh says, They shall not dwell in thy land, lest they make thee sin against me. No aliens were allowed to become too numerous, lest they devour the land. And look at us now. We whites are a minority in this country. The Latinos and other races represent more than 52% of the population here in the United States, regardless of what the census report says. Have you ever wondered at the long genealogies of the various people mentioned in the Bible? There was a good reason for this. Their genealogy proved that they were pure Israelite blood and entitled to take part in its affairs. Citizenship was not given for 2 box tops and a dime, or to all that came along. Those who were of related bloodlines, but not actually of Israel, could only be admitted to citizenship in the third generation that was born in the land. Today, we have anchor babies coming over, Mexicans coming over, pregnant women dropping their babies and becoming citizens, the whole damn family. Today, an immigrant scarcely needs to be off the boat or come across the border enough to get him off the boat or come across the border before he can start the process of becoming a citizen. Far too short a time required for aliens from some parts of the world to really learn our way of life. They can and do memorize certain things they must be able to recite on their examination for citizenship. But today, the politicians will grant amnesty and citizenship with them having to do nothing. This is because the Democrats, progressive, communists, know what they can get, that they can get their votes. Under Yahweh's laws, those who were not closely related to us racially could not be admitted to citizenship ever. They could not become citizens even after 10 generations. By violating Yahweh's laws, we have now considerable blocks of unassimilable aliens who have been given the vote. They hate all ideals of this land, to which they have come, only to get more money and to suck off the white race. Now our political parties are selling out the great white American majority and bidding for the support of the alien minority groups, especially that of the Jews. Under Yahweh's laws, nobody of another race is to be allowed to hold a public office. And look, they're ruling over us in our cities, our townships, our states, and even over the government. Look who's our president. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, one which is not thy brother. The word translated stranger is the Hebrew word Nakri, which doesn't mean someone you haven't met, but someone of another race. That persons of another race could reach positions of power is clearly stated to be a curse which comes upon us for violation of divine law. And if you don't believe America is under a curse from Yahweh God, you haven't left your cave in the mountains somewhere in the high Rockies of Colorado. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy God, to observe to do all of his commandments and his statutes, which I command this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. The stranger that is within thee shall set up above thee very high, and they have, and thou shalt come down very low, and we have. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of Yahweh thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which he has commanded thee. So who owns all the money in this country, and if not indeed the entire rest of the world? The international Jewish bankers. Every time you run your credit card through a reader to purchase a goods or buy some food, you're paying usury to these evil vipers who are exacting every pound of economic flesh they can from you and driving this country into the sewer. We're $16 trillion in immediate visible debt, but over $200 trillion in debt as you look down the next 30 years on the entitlement programs and all the committed money that has been promised to every country and military group and everybody else. We have been persistently led away from the laws of Yahweh by certain political groups who don't even claim to represent the majority of people, the white Christian Americans, which were no longer a majority. These politicians openly admit they represent only alliances of minority groups. These politicians call themselves liberals. They call themselves progressives. They call themselves Democrats. But they don't call themselves what they really are, as communists. This was also known to Yahweh thousands of years before it happened. Yahweh told us of their true character. If we would have obeyed Yahweh in making our laws and our national policies, these evils would never have come upon us. From the very beginning, the commandment not to permit mongrelization is strongly emphasized. So, he says, I am Yahweh thy God, which have separated you from other people. But we, in our ego and ignorance and foolhardiness and stiff-neckedness, draw these people in and marry them and invite them into our homes and feed them and treat them with dignity and respect which they don't deserve. If you do in any wise go back and cleave unto the remnant of these nations, even these that remain among you, and shall make marriage with them, and go into them, and they unto you, know for a certainty that they shall be snares and traps unto you, and scourges in your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until ye perish off of this good land which Yahweh your God has given you. And they did it to the Israelites of old, and he's doing it to us in the United States. The Bible tells we Israelites over and over again to be separated, never to marry outside of our race, and never to have another race rule over us. Well, we've certainly disobeyed all of those laws, haven't we? We as a race, a people, and a nation have violated every one of these demands from Yahweh, and we will lose this nation. The only thing left is to go quietly into the night, waiting our individual judgments from Yahweh, or we take to the streets, rid ourselves of the Jew first and the people of color next. Failing to do this, we will suffer the wrath of Yahweh, and I guarantee you that. Will you hear the words on that great day, well and good done, well and good faithful servant? Well, God, I get so passionate here. Will you hear the words from our Master, well done, good and faithful servant? Or will you hear the words, depart from me, I never knew you? The choice is yours alone. And with that, boys and goyim, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for being here. May Yahweh bless and keep you. May he lift his face upon you and give you peace. Amen.